My son's daycare posted a video of them dealing with problem kids. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to Tail Hub. What you're about to hear is based on true events, or at least, I hope it isn't. I was halfway through my lunch, staring at a sad desk salad that already looked tired before I even opened the lid, when my phone buzzed. A text from another mom. "You need to see this right now." There was a video link attached. No context, no emoji, nothing. Just that single line and the link pulsing below it. I almost didn't click it. I was mid-bite, buried in spreadsheets and the soft hum of an office that didn't care whether I existed. But then I remembered her son was in the same class as mine. So I tapped the link. The moment the video started, my fork slipped from my fingers and landed on my keyboard with a dull, metallic sound. On the screen was the head teacher from my son's daycare, Ms. Alden. The video looked like something the daycare had posted themselves. The caption read, "Our innovative calming technique for problem children." I watched as she smiled into the camera, that bright, tight-lipped daycare smile, explaining something about managing emotions, building trust, staying calm. But what I saw next made the room around me fade. There was a child sitting on a soft mat, not mine, but about his age. Ms. Alden knelt beside him, gently talking, then reached for a blanket. She said something about creating a safe sensory space and began to wrap the blanket around the child. The demonstration cut off before I could understand more, but the image was already burned into my mind. The comments below were closed. The likes were hidden. The video description said only, "Parents, please read our upcoming newsletter for details on this new emotional regulation approach." A pit opened in my stomach. Something about it felt wrong. Wrong in a way that language couldn't explain. I closed the video, but the thumbnail remained on my screen, mocking me with its frozen smile. I texted the mom back. "What is this?" She replied instantly, "I don't know, but it's been deleted from their page." I saved it before it disappeared. Deleted? That was enough to send my pulse climbing. When I went to the daycare's social media page, there was nothing. No trace of the video, not even the caption. Just the usual posts. Finger painting, nap time routines, birthday cupcakes. Everything looked painfully normal. I told myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe there was a reason. But the gnawing sense of unease didn't leave me. It stayed, buzzing like static at the back of my skull. By the time I picked up my son, it was already dark. The daycare smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons, like always. The front lobby was quiet. Ms. Alden stood at the sign-out desk, smiling that same bright, polished smile. "Hi there," she said, cheerful as ever. "How was your day?" I muttered something polite and signed the sheet. My son ran out from his classroom, clutching his tiny backpack. His face lit up when he saw me. I bent down to hug him, and noticed faint marks on his forearm. Not bruises, not scratches. Just small red indentations, like pressure marks. "Did you fall?" I asked. But he didn't answer. He just pressed his face against my neck and whispered something too soft to hear. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thumbnail, the teacher kneeling beside the child, that blanket, the way her hands moved so calmly, so methodically. By morning, I'd convinced myself to let it go. I had work, bills, a life that couldn't afford paranoia. But then, on my way out, I checked my email. There it was, the daycare newsletter. Subject line, "Introducing the Safe Cocoon Method." I opened it. The message was long, filled with buzzwords about safety, security, sensory feedback. There was a paragraph about comfort boundaries and supportive restraint, written in the kind of careful language designed to sound professional while saying nothing at all. At the bottom was a note. Parents interested in observing a demonstration may request a private session. My hand froze over the mouse. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see it, but I had to. I scheduled a visit for the following week. The day of the observation, the sky was a flat, gray sheet, the kind that made everything look washed out. The front desk staff greeted me warmly, like they always did. But I noticed something different. Fewer parents around, quieter halls. They led me to a small observation room. A one-way mirror looked into a classroom filled with soft mats, toys, and a few small chairs arranged in a circle. Ms. Alden entered the room with 2 assistants. She smiled at the children, moving with calm precision. I watched as she gestured for a boy to sit down. He hesitated. She crouched down, said something softly, and the boy slowly sat on the mat. Then she turned toward a cabinet and opened it. I couldn't see what she took out, only the reflection of the object's pale color. One of the assistants glanced toward the mirror, and for a split second, I could have sworn her eyes locked onto mine. Something in my chest tightened. The demonstration began, but the audio feed wasn't working. I could only see their lips moving, hands guiding, motions that were gentle yet rigid, rehearsed. The child looked calm, too calm. When it ended, Ms. Alden looked up at the mirror and smiled. That same, rehearsed daycare smile. And then she mouthed something. It took me a moment to realize what she said. "We take care of them." After that, I stopped sleeping again. In the following days, strange things started happening. The mom who'd first sent me the video stopped replying to messages. Her number disconnected. A new parent group chat appeared, managed by the daycare. All the old message threads vanished. Emails from the daycare came daily, cheerful, polished updates, as if to drown out the unease. But every time I looked at the header image, children smiling in a circle, I felt something shift in my stomach. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. I started watching my son more closely. He seemed fine, mostly. But sometimes, when he played alone, I noticed him wrapping his blanket around himself, carefully, methodically, humming something low and strange, like a tune he didn't know he knew. When I asked him where he learned it, he said, "It helps when they want me to be quiet." I didn't ask who they were. I called the daycare that night, demanding to speak with Ms. Alden. The receptionist said she wasn't available, that she was preparing materials for the annual training. Training for what? I asked if my son could take a break for a week. The response was quick. "Of course, but please remember that consistency is important for emotional regulation." That line felt rehearsed. The next morning, when I told my son he was staying home, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. It wasn't happiness, it was confusion, as if he didn't know what to do without the structure they'd built around him. That was when I realized it wasn't just about what they were doing, it was about what they were teaching, and whatever it was, it had already started to take root. The next morning, I woke up with a tight knot in my chest. Sleep had left me, but the unease hadn't. My son was asleep in his crib, a faint shadow on his face from the early sun. I watched him for a long moment, feeling the weight of the video pressing on my mind. I started with Google. I typed "Safe Cocoon Method Daycare" and scrolled through page after page. Nothing. No news articles, no blog posts, not even forum threads. It was like it didn't exist outside of the one video I'd seen. Even the daycare's own website only mentioned innovative approaches to emotional regulation, in vague terms. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to the daycare. I asked if I could see documentation about the method, training manuals, anything. I didn't expect a reply, but within an hour, one arrived. Polite, perfectly worded, reassuring. Attached was a PDF of 5 pages filled with generic charts, diagrams of children smiling, and blocks of text about sensory integration and positive reinforcement. I read through it, word by word. The words themselves were harmless. The diagrams were innocent. But I couldn't shake the feeling that every sentence was hiding something, a deliberate omission, a coded reassurance. The next step was to ask other parents. I called a few numbers from the class roster. One mother answered. Her voice was cheerful, but a note of tension slipped through. "Yes, everything is fine," she said quickly. "The method is good, very effective. Don't worry about the video, it's old." When I pressed for more, she cut the call short. That was it. Silence from everyone else. Messages went unanswered. Numbers disconnected. Emails bounced back. It felt like the daycare had surrounded itself with a bubble, impermeable and unyielding. Determined, I decided to visit in person. I requested a meeting under the pretense of discussing my son's progress. They accommodated me immediately, their cheerfulness polite but strained. The observation room was the same as before, but now there was an added layer of discomfort. Even the air felt different. Ms. Alden greeted me, smiling, her eyes betraying nothing. "Welcome back. Today we'll observe a structured session." I watched as children were directed to different areas of the classroom. Each movement was precise, each interaction rehearsed. There was laughter, but it was punctuated with pauses that felt unnatural. I noticed subtle gestures, the way the assistants moved around the room. Not harmful, not alarming in a concrete way, but rigid, almost ritualistic. I realized that the fear I felt wasn't about the children. It was about control. The way everything was orchestrated, how predictability was enforced, how deviations were corrected silently, with minimal acknowledgement. I started taking notes on the methods they used. Structured calm corners, guided breathing, blanket comfort technique. Each term sounded innocent on its own, but the accumulation formed a pattern. Extreme control masked as care. I left that day with a heavy head and a racing mind. I needed more evidence. I needed proof that what I suspected wasn't just paranoia. Over the next week, I returned several times, under different pretexts. I watched. I recorded mental notes. I even started to sketch layouts of the rooms, placement of mats, lines of sight. Every parent who approached seemed distant, cautious. Even casual conversations ended abruptly. Then I discovered the small discrepancy that changed everything. A child who wasn't on the daily roster appeared in the classroom one day, just for a few minutes, and then disappeared again. When I asked the assistant about it, she said, "Oh, that's a special visitor. Nothing to worry about." Special visitor. Nothing to worry about. The phrase echoed in my mind, chilling in its vagueness. I realized that the daycare's meticulous documentation and outward cheer were a facade. There was something underneath, something hidden, orchestrated in ways parents weren't meant to see. I decided to speak to someone in authority outside the daycare. A friend of mine, a local journalist, agreed to look into it. She asked for any evidence I had, screenshots, videos, email chains. I sent everything. She promised discretion, but her voice was tense when she said, "This is unusual. We'll see what we can uncover." That night, I checked my son's room one last time before sleeping. He was rearranging his toys in patterns I hadn't noticed before, methodically, almost mechanically. I sat on the edge of his bed and watched, feeling a helpless knot tighten in my stomach. Days passed, and my journalist friend reported small anomalies. A missing daycare license update, unexplained substitutions of staff and records, the video removed from social media with no explanation. Nothing illegal, at least not on paper. But the pattern was undeniable. Something hidden, something controlling, pervasive. One evening, I returned to the daycare under the pretense of picking up my son early. The classroom was quiet, the afternoon sun spilling across the mats. I watched from the observation window as Ms. Alden moved among the children. Every motion, every gesture was precise, calculated. Then, one of the assistants glanced toward the mirror, my reflection, and held my gaze. The air shifted. For a heartbeat, I felt recognized not just as a visitor, but as an intruder into something meant to remain unseen. I realized then that the truth of the safe cocoon method was not a single act, not a single video. It was the system itself, the totality of control, manipulation, and hidden observation. The method didn't harm in the way I had initially feared, but it reshaped the environment, the children, the parents' perception of care. It was quiet, invisible, yet powerful. I left that day with a resolution. I had enough to confront them, to demand clarity, and to protect my son. I would not wait until the system embedded itself further. The next morning, I scheduled a private meeting with Ms. Alden. I arrived early, my son in tow, and waited in the empty lobby. When she entered, smiling as always, I noticed for the first time a flicker behind her eyes, a trace of anticipation, as if she had been expecting me. The meeting began cordially. I asked questions, calmly, meticulously, about training, methods, and children's routines. Each answer was polished, rehearsed, precise. But I pressed further, subtly, gently, revealing that I had observed patterns, records, and inconsistencies. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes narrowed, just slightly. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in. "You're very thorough," she said softly, "but you must understand. Everything we do is for the children's well-being." I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "I understand that. But I need transparency. I need clarity. I need to know what my son experiences when he's here." She paused, and then, just a fraction of a second, the mask faltered. The calculation in her movements, the precision in her speech, the practiced calm, it slipped, revealing the meticulous, controlled engine beneath. I realized then that I had reached the threshold. I knew enough to understand the depth of the system. I could confront it, challenge it, or step back and watch it continue. I chose to confront. The next few days were a blur of emails, meetings, and quiet observation. My son seemed unaware of the tension surrounding him. He laughed, played, and repeated the humming patterns he had picked up, innocent in his imitation. But I could feel the pattern, the rhythm of the place, the structured calm, the careful observation. It continued. And I understood. This wasn't about punishment or malice. It was about control in its most subtle, pervasive form. I documented everything meticulously, every observation, every email, every minor anomaly. I was building a case, not against a person, but against the invisible architecture of authority that had taken root around the children. One evening, I reviewed my notes, emails, and video screenshots. My heart raced not from fear, but from clarity. I understood the scale of what I had uncovered. I didn't know what would happen next, whether the daycare would acknowledge the system, deny it, or attempt to hide it further. But I knew one thing. I could not allow the unnoticed control to continue unchecked. And as I looked at my son asleep that night, I made a silent promise. No matter how intricate the web of appearances, I would protect him. The following week, I approached the daycare with a new purpose. I had my notes, emails, observations, and screenshots meticulously organized. I walked through the front doors with my son holding my hand, feeling the familiar antiseptic smell and the faint hum of activity. But this time, I wasn't just a parent. I was a witness, an observer, someone demanding answers. Ms. Alden greeted me at the door with her usual bright smile. "Good morning? Ready for our meeting?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need a complete explanation of the safe cocoon method. Every detail you can provide." Her smile faltered, just slightly, and for a fraction of a second, her composure shifted. She nodded and led me into the observation room. I took a seat and laid my notes on the table. The children's soft laughter floated in from the classroom beyond the mirror. I could hear the gentle cadence of guided play, the careful instructions, the subtle rhythm of routines. "I've been reviewing the materials you sent," I began, "and I've observed your methods firsthand. There are inconsistencies and discrepancies that I need clarified. Please explain everything, starting with the rationale behind the structured routines and sensory interventions." Ms. Alden leaned back, clasping her hands. "Of course. Every technique we employ is designed to help children develop emotional regulation, to create a safe, consistent environment where they can thrive. The safe cocoon method, as you've referred to it, is merely an extension of these principles." I nodded, pretending to follow, but my mind was racing. I had seen the patterns, the subtle cues, the hidden control woven into every interaction. The children weren't harmed in any overt way, but the system shaped behavior, emotions, and perceptions without parents' full awareness. "You must understand," she continued, "that consistency is paramount. Children respond best to structure and predictable guidance. Our goal is safety, comfort, and emotional growth." "Yes," I said, "but there are anomalies, missing documentation, deleted videos, staff rotations that aren't reflected in official records. These create a lack of transparency. I need clarity on these points." Her eyes flickered briefly toward the mirror, then back at me. "Our records are maintained according to regulations. Sometimes updates take time to process. The video you saw was an internal demonstration, removed to protect privacy, and staff schedules vary according to need." I leaned forward. "The patterns I've observed, the methods, the control mechanisms, they are pervasive. They influence every aspect of a child's day. Even parents begin to adopt the routines unknowingly. Isn't it fair to say that the level of influence goes beyond what's transparent?" A pause. Her smile remained, but it no longer felt warm. It was measured, precise. "Our methods are carefully designed. We do not seek to control beyond what is necessary for emotional development. Every intervention is intentional, measured, and observed." I held her gaze. "And yet, the children imitate patterns, repeat behaviors, and follow cues we aren't explicitly informed about. There's a subtle orchestration happening, one that shapes perception, behavior, and understanding without direct awareness." For a moment, the room felt suspended. The hum from the classroom beyond the mirror seemed louder. I realized that this confrontation was not about exposing wrongdoing, not about finding malice. It was about visibility, accountability, and the power of observation. Finally, she nodded slowly. "You are perceptive. The environment we create is influential. That is the nature of structured care. We shape behavior through consistency, expectation, and emotional guidance. It is subtle, yes, but our intention is nurturing, not harmful." I exhaled. I had reached the truth. Not the truth of horror, but the truth of subtle, pervasive influence. The safe cocoon method wasn't about punishment, fear, or cruelty. It was about control, carefully applied, designed to shape, to guide, to structure. That understanding, once fully realized, brought both relief and unease. I stood, gathering my notes. "Thank you for your honesty. I will take this information and observe my son with full awareness. Transparency will guide how I move forward." She smiled again. This time, it felt slightly more genuine. "Thank you for your diligence. That is all any parent can ask for." I left the daycare that afternoon with my son, hand in hand. The shadows outside seemed lighter, the air clearer. I had confronted the system, understood its mechanisms, and reclaimed a measure of agency for both myself and my child. Over the next weeks, I adjusted my routines at home. I taught my son awareness, choice, and observation. He continued to play, hum his little patterns, but now with intention. He was learning not just the routines the daycare instilled, but also his own sense of autonomy. The experience changed me. I became more vigilant, more conscious of the subtle forces shaping children's lives. I realized that vigilance wasn't just about protecting my child from harm, but about understanding influence, asserting transparency, and maintaining agency in environments that claim to guide and nurture. It wasn't easy. Some nights, I still woke up with the echo of the first video, the unsettling precision of routines, the quiet intensity of control. But now I also had clarity. Knowledge was power, observation was protection, awareness was safety. And so, life continued. The daycare operated as always, children laughing, learning, and playing. But for me, the world had shifted. I had seen behind the curtain, understood the machinery of influence, and emerged aware. Thank you for listening. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe to Tail Hub for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support means everything,